Welcome back to episode 2.
Okay. You wanted to get into you losing your period. You want to tell us about that?
I really want to talk about like losing periods when training, because this has happened to me a bunch. It kind of happened when I was like 17 to 18 years old, and I was doing a lot of lifting and like running to supplement like my sport, and I didn't have like a trainer or someone assigned to me, so I was kind of taking myself through it, and it was mostly men, not women, that I was competing against, so I was always trying to like keep myself to that level, and I didn't have much knowledge about how my cycle was being affected. Like I had very basic but also like random, vague, not specific knowledge, and I found that a couple of times I either was like just spotting during my periods, and there was a couple of times where I completely lost my period as well, and it was really strange, and I remember that no one was fucking talking about it. Like I'm sure other people were experiencing it, but no one was talking about it, which made me like not want to talk about it but keep up the training. So it was like this weird thing where I was experiencing something kind of scary and wasn't talking about it just because it didn't feel normal to talk about. But I just want to talk about losing periods, why that happens, and how as active people or as athletes, how we can kind of combat that.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing you're describing is low energy availability, and it's basically when you don't have enough nutrition coming in to balance both the really tough training that you're doing plus your body like regularly functioning and going through its biological functioning, like your reproductive health. So you have enough energy to smash your workouts and train equal to the men in your team, but then when it comes to ovulating and menstruating, your body doesn't have enough energy for that. So basically what happens is, say you don't have enough carbs coming in, your hypothalamus will freak out and tell your body like we don't have enough energy coming in, so that will affect your luteinizing hormone, which then affects your estrogen, and your estradiol drops. So then that's affecting your ovulation. If you don't ovulate, you don't menstruate, and you may have felt like, oh, I'm not actually like losing weight, so it doesn't seem like I have low energy. But that's because a different hormone, estrone, which affects like your fat tissue storage, that goes up when estradiol reduces too low, and that will basically make your body hold on to your fat because your body's in survival mode, and your body thinks it's going through famine, so there's no time to even prepare to be pregnant, so I'm not going to ovulate and I'm not going to menstruate. And that's basically why you lost your period and why a lot of female athletes experience the same thing.
Yeah, and that's so interesting to me. Well, one of the things that's specifically interesting is that it kind of felt like an invisible force, because I didn't, as you said, my workouts were going okay, like I just had to put in that extra effort. I was kind of managing all the other things going on in my life. I didn't feel like I was eating less, and also I personally was not losing weight. In fact, as you said, I was like putting on more fat, and I didn't at any point feel like I was presenting as someone who needed to like eat more, you know what I'm like, that I was like on the space where I was like not taking care of myself. I thought I was taking care of myself. So it feels really strange, like there was this invisible force that was, but I guess it's something that you can't see, because like with an injury you can see the injury and address it, but with your period and with lack of information, it's something that feels invisible. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that when your body is doing something like ovulating or menstruating, it needs that extra energy and extra rest to like regulate itself. And then the other thing was, I remember, because like when I like, even for me, like not only the men, but even for me, I thought I could say I'm on my period when I'm actually on my period and be like, sorry guys, I can't run today, I'm on my period. But I feel like, and like that's legitimate, but I feel like sometimes my energy level actually drops the day before my period starts, or 2 days before my period starts. But if I tell people I'm just not feeling up to it today and I think it's my hormone cycle, no one's gonna, like everyone's gonna be like, this is something to push through. Which I like, me not knowing anything understand, so I would. But I feel like me now knowing that like your hormones are like not necessarily menstruate, it's also ovulation that like affects your hormones, then it becomes like a valid thing to bring up. So I feel like the education around it needs to be more holistic and not just, oh, I'm on my period.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And I also think because like athletes are so generally just taught to like push through and like, you know, like you push your body till failure and that's a sign of success. Because of that, like, you know, you don't, you know, listen to your body like in regards to the cycle and your energy levels, because you're just taught to push through it. And yeah, like exactly, like if we know more about it and know how to deal with it and treat our body and train our body according to our cycle, you're not like making an excuse to like not train. You're just like training in a different way that is like, you know, that works for your body in that moment of your cycle.
Absolutely.
I think more like women's like professional teams are using this. I heard about the Chelsea football club women's team using it, and I know a few years ago the US soccer team used it as well, where the coaches actually like ask each of the players to track their cycle, and then they don't use that to train as a team but individually. So if they're at a certain point in their cycle, they might like train harder at the gym, strength train more, whereas if they're like you were saying a few days before their period, they might deload at the gym. And I think more women should be doing that, like tracking their cycle and their symptoms, just to know like this is a point in my cycle where I know I can do a certain thing, or when I can't, and maybe I shouldn't push too hard because that might affect me in the long term as well.
Yeah, and I think that is something that is like just now happening, like even as recent as just this year or last year. Like it's not something that, like it is something that is very new, and I think we only got to this point of, you know, coaches and teams understanding the importance of training according to your cycle, because I feel like the women's sports world was almost in a crisis because so many athletes were just getting injured. Like, you know, in women's football we have like the ACL epidemic. Like it was literally called an epidemic because players were like dropping like flies with the rate of ACL injuries that they were picking up, and it was like top players, captains of national teams were not able to play in the World Cup because of ACL injuries. And it's sad that it had to get to that point for like anyone to like wake up and open their eyes and be like, okay, yeah, maybe we do need, you know, more information that is where we've actually done research on female bodies, and, you know, and we are conducting, you know, training and things according to that, instead of just using medical research that was done on male bodies and just using, you know, extrapolating it for the women. And now FIFA and Adidas and, you know, like big names are putting money into doing research specifically for ACL injuries, but also just, you know, menstrual cycles in relation to injuries. And but is it are females and like female athletes more susceptible to injuries like during menstruation?
So I think first it's a structural thing. So because of our wider hips, I think it's called like a Q angle between your quads and your tendons. That's like wider, so that like we're just born more susceptible to ACL injuries. And then I think I was reading that at a certain time, I think it was that when estrogen is dominant, that affects your ACL laxity. So that at that point in your cycle, you are more susceptible specifically to ACL injuries. And then also right before your period, maybe you have PMS symptoms, you're just more inflamed. So that affects like your bodily functioning, and that could also make you more susceptible to injuries if you're like a female athlete and you're going hard every day.
What's laxity?
Laxity. I think I'm gonna have to look it up probably, but I think it's just like how smoothly all like your ACL, like that, your quad triangle, how smoothly they all work together. So yeah, like
because I really experienced that. I really experienced that. I feel like during like around the stage where I'm feeling low energy, I also feel that I become like a stiffer, and like there's a buildup of like lactic acid in my body and around my joints. And I don't feel this on the day to day, but if I'm doing something like a longer distance, or if I'm hitting like a more strenuous workout, I just feel like I need to stretch more, or I'm just like more sore in general. But I had no idea that hormones actually affect like lactic acid buildup, or like how tense or not tense your muscles are, which is crazy.
Yeah, your hormones definitely affect your recovery. Like your HRV, how fit you are, drops every month as well. Your resting heart rate will drop.
That's great. So when you say inflammation, what do you mean by inflammation? Because what I know is like I have a wound and it is inflamed, but what is like a body period related inflammation?
So maybe I'll describe it as, so remember I was like parasympathetic versus sympathetic dominant state. So that's when you're not as resilient. So anything will just make things, like if you're training hard, will just make recovery tougher. So your body is just more like stressed out in general, so like kind of inflamed. And you also, that's the time you're preparing for pregnancy. So your body is like, I don't want to work out hard, I'm gonna have a baby. So,
just to like restart the topic a bit, the Vinesh Phogat incident that happened at the Paris 2024 Olympics was super interesting in terms of like women, weight, and sports that rely on weight categories. So she was competing in the lightweight boxing category, so she had to be 50 or under kilos, and she was measured the night before her competition, which was a medal bout, to be overweight. And so she spent the entire night trying to lose weight through like insane things. She was like running on a treadmill, she's wearing like a sweatsuit, she shaved her head, like just crazy things, and she ended up being 100 grams overweight, and they still wouldn't let her play, and they stripped her of her bronze medal. And I just think it's crazy because as someone who has periods and who's a woman, I know what an inflamed body, what that, like I put on weight so easily when I'm at a certain part of my period and I'm losing weight. And so the fluctuations are something my body does naturally. And then to be in a sport or in a weight category where I have to control the natural processes in my body, just it doesn't feel like an athletic endeavor, it feels like a self-sabotaging endeavor. And so I don't really understand how these rules are like they feel a little outdated for women playing these sports. I don't have a solution necessarily, but I wish there was 100 grams cannot be change like skill assessment or like cannot be such an unfair advantage that a woman is like shaving her head to make the weight category. And so though I don't have an outright solution, and maybe the boxing federation has like some logic behind all of this, I do think that there needs to be like demands from women and a structural change in how we judge and how we enforce weight categories for women's sports.
I mean, I think rules specifically made for women and women's bodies. And I mean, you can tell us more about it, of like just during your cycle, like whether you can't control weight gain ever, obviously, but like during your cycle, like how that's like
and how we change, like what 100 grams means to the female body and things like that.
I mean, I don't know where she was in her cycle, but if it was like a water weight issue, if you experience PMS and you're bloated, like how can you really help that bloating means you're holding on to more water, so that could be a difference of 100 grams. Our body produces chemicals called prostaglandins, which basically help you start bleeding, like shedding your uterine lining. And if you produce those in excess, that causes inflammation and bloating, joint pain, things like that. So again, I don't know where she was in her cycle, but if that's what she was experiencing, like that, you can't really stop things like that, especially overnight. And like what you said is correct, like our bodies fluctuate throughout our cycle and it's hardly ever in our hands. Like we can do a lot of things to reduce our symptoms and just make ourselves feel better, but
Yeah.
not to the point where it's like I'm gonna make myself lose 100 grams.
No,
Like that's
exactly.
impossible.
Yeah, and I mean it like 100 grams feels like such a negligible amount. Like I understand that in sports that are like wrestling and boxing where weight categories are just so important and rigid, but surely like 100 grams here and there doesn't like affect the skill level, and especially like if it is for females, and we at least now today we know so much more about cycles and periods, and we know that these things fluctuate and are not in in anyone's control. Surely like that's something that can be amended.
I completely, and this is my like I'm not claiming to have the answers. I'm not even like, honestly, if the Boxing Federation has a logic behind this, please like let us in on it, because I don't know if I fully.
I think it's just rules that were made for men that are now being used for women. I don't think we need to give them leeway.
but if there was, I'm not privy to it. So if it was made more public, that would be helpful. But regardless, I feel like there was an argument that I read which was like, it's applicable to everyone, therefore everyone has to abide by it. But what kind of logic is that, bro? Like, come on, like that you can let anything slide by that logic.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. And I'm like, no, but and also someone who has experienced losing periods because of like trying to push your body to be something, at that point it's not even about excellence, it's not even about the triumph of like the human body, the human spirit. It's literally like killing your natural instincts and your natural body, and I just don't see how that can be okay, and how we can be like, because everyone's following that weight category, you have to follow it also. Like,
also saying that it's applicable to everyone doesn't make sense, because it's almost like saying that like asking for this kind of change or whatever, like a little bit of leeway is like exactly, like it's like asking for a leeway when like everything, the norm is for men, the standard is for men, so what's applicable to everyone is the standard that's been set for men. So like that doesn't make any sense in general.
On that specific note, though, about weight loss and weight gain, I'd love to talk about metabolic rates and how our periods inform that and how that changes through our cycles.
Yeah. So when you're in your luteal phase, when progesterone is more dominant, we're actually losing 100 to 300 more calories, just in general, just by being alive. And so our nutritional needs also go up. When progesterone is dominant, our muscle building capacity goes down, so maybe your protein needs go up. Whereas in the follicular phase, when estrogen is dominant, your metabolic rate slows down and you can build more muscle. So that also changes throughout your cycle. And if you are a professional athlete, nutrition is obviously a huge part of your life. So again, I think especially for women who need to hold on to their muscle, knowing this would affect their entire training, I think.
Yeah.
100%. And it's so interesting, even like for an elite athlete, but even as someone who's active and who's trying to build muscle, just knowing these things is so important. To know what to expect from your body when you're training. Like, forget anything else, but just to know, to not be disappointed or to not be shocked by how your body is responding to things.
I think I used to be like that before I knew about like cycles and hormones. I used to push myself really hard at the gym, and when I couldn't lift a certain weight or run a certain distance, I would blame it on myself. But I didn't know that there were just times where my body just needed some rest and it's doing something else. It's literally like it's preparing for pregnancy. Whereas I'm like trying to run a 10K in like 5 minutes or something.
No, 100%. And I think that it is still something that I'm like trying to unlearn and rewire my brain to think in this way, because when you grow up training as an athlete, you like if you don't, like I said, if you don't train till failure, like my coach used to be like, if you haven't, thrown up at the end of a training session, it's, it's not a successful training session. So if you grow up thinking that that's how hard you have to push your body every time, and that's the only way that you've, worked out well, or you're like successful in that way, then, you don't really understand exactly what you said. Like you're not understanding your body and what it needs when you're training. And like I think it's so hard to unlearn. I'm still figuring it out, and it is just easy to blame yourself and be hard on yourself.
Yeah, 100%. On metabolic rates and cycles and your training, do you have any recommendations for like food intake, or like how to even like gauge things like that?
Yeah. So I don't really count calories. I never have macros either. I just try to like portion size if I can. But I do know, like I was saying earlier, there are certain times where we may need more carbs, or we may need more protein. So there's that. You would need, when you're losing more calories, so when your metabolic rate has sped up, you may need to eat a little bit more carbs and protein to keep maintaining that muscle when you're at a time that progesterone is dominant and you're not building muscle as easily. Also, I guess to do with like sugar cravings, because we are losing that extra 100 to 300 calories. Sugar is the easiest way for our bodies to get what they need, so that's why our cravings go up. Like that's why we have a sweet tooth when we're PMSing. It's the science behind it. We crave like that instant energy uptake in the form of sugar. So I think just knowing where you are on your cycle, like I tell everyone this, track your cycle, track your symptoms, and that way you better understand yourself. You're a little bit nicer to yourself to like sometimes like if I'm craving something, I'll know why, and then maybe I'll like balance it with like a boiled egg and then like eat whatever sweet treat I want. So I think knowing where you are on your cycle, knowing what symptoms will come up to you will help you manage it. And also on the other side, like using your cycle and your symptoms to optimize your fitness. If you're trying to put on muscle, if you're trying to become quicker, whatever it is, like knowing what days of your cycle you do have that extra motivation and energy, using that to your advantage, like trying to hit a PR at the gym, trying to run a longer distance, whatever it is for you. I think that's what everyone, not just elite female athletes, should be doing.
100%. That's awesome. Also, on that note, really quickly, before we move on to the menopause thing, because it's in the same realm, but I'd love to talk about how being on your cycle and how all of these hormonal changes, metabolic rate changes affects like neurotransmitter activity in your brain. Because we were talking about how really important part about being an athlete or like being an active person who plays a sport is not only having like ability to repair your body, but to hold mental stamina, to hold focus. And sometimes it's distracting when you're in pain, but also sometimes I feel like I have a lack of focus when I'm at a specific point in my period. And honestly, I feel the same not just for sports, but also for like flow state when I'm trying to be creative, which leads me to believe it's like a mental thing.
Yeah. So estrogen is associated with serotonin. So when that's dominant, you feel amazing. Like for me personally, where I am right now, I'm on cycle day 4. And this, for the next week, I feel like this is my true self. This is who I am. I'm a positive person. I like to like uplift people who are around me. I'm creative. I'm focused. Whatever, I feel strong at the gym, quicker when I'm running, all of that. And then through, like, when I'm PMSing, that's when, so progesterone is associated, it's more like it has sedative effects on your body, so you feel a little bit more low and, like, calm sometimes, but if it drops too low, which happens right before your period, that's when you feel the opposite of when serotonin's high. So you feel low, you kind of want to cocoon in. So I think for female athletes, like obviously this is gonna affect their mental focus and just like having their head in the game and stuff like that. If you have emotional triggers and you're gonna go play a game in the next few minutes, like that's gonna affect how you play. So I think again, like just knowing where you are in your cycle and knowing what symptoms you're susceptible to, tracking your cycle will help. So if a female athlete knows that she's PMSing, she can, kind of tell herself, okay, I might be just a little bit sad today. So being aware will help her then get back into having her head in the game.
That's awesome. And you were mentioning something about like neurotransmitter activity and how that's affected.
So progesterone affects GABA, which makes you, like I was saying, just a little bit more introverted. You might get introspective. So that could affect someone's game, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I mean, I was thinking about what you said of like, in the first week of your cycle, you feel the most yourself and like the fastest and the strongest and things like that. And I'm like almost wondering, like for female athletes, like you have to always be the fastest you can be and the strongest you can be. There's no option to not be the best when you play at that level. And I don't know, like how do they figure that out while being on your period and like figuring out the different stages of your cycle?
Also to piggyback of that, I wonder if there were like ever races where a woman broke a world record but she was like not at her peak point and she could have like broken that record. You know what I mean? Like I wonder what is the potential of timing when it comes to these things.
Female athletes are insane. What they do, whatever time of the month it is, I'm always just like, wow.
I mean, that's all I can say. Like how do you how do they figure that all out? It's insane.
And just having that control over your body and it would honestly, I feel like I'm a pretty competitive person, and if I know I can be better, I want to be better. Like that, there is no option of like it doesn't feel like I would be soft to myself about that, which is not the best thing. But what I'm trying to say is that if I knew I was at a point, like if I'm feeling low or something, and I have to compete on that day, I like eat myself about it, like chew myself about it a little bit, because I know that I'm able to do so much more. So and in many competitions, like you lose a match and you're out of the tournament, and then there's like no more of like playing that or in that championship for you. So it's just such a funny thing to have to negotiate.
And I think I wonder whether, because like I'm thinking back when I was a competitive athlete, and I honestly don't, like my period was not a big part of my life, and I did not think about, like I was like, if I had a period when I had a meet and in season, that was every weekend, so it was very possible. I can't think of even one instance where that was like an inconvenience or a problem. And yes, of course, there was definitely also age was a factor, but I don't know, maybe like for female athletes who are athletes for like majority of their lives, like maybe it's like you said, like there's so much other stuff going on that they have to focus on, that they don't almost have the luxury to focus on their cycle and how that is affecting their mood or everything else.
I get it. But if female athletes watching this, we think you're so cool for like managing all of that. Like even if it's not something you're actively thinking about, we're actively thinking about it.
100%. And maybe like step one is that periods should not be taboo, so that we can like have access to information of like, okay, she ran 1,300 meters in 13 seconds or whatever, 10 seconds, and she was on day 8 of her cycle. That would be so cool. That would be so cool.
No idea how happy I would be. That became like a thing.
How we stated winning or losing.
Like that would be like another parameter, or like that would just be so sick. Like even like you were saying for weight categories of like, maybe the first question they should ask is what day of your cycle are you
where
on?
are you in your cycle right now?
That makes so much sense. But one last thing I wanted to touch upon before menopause was female athletes that go through pregnancy and then also come back and continue to play their sport, and not just play their sport, like play at a very elite high level and continue to excel. Like, you know, Serena Williams had a kid and then went on to win like that many more Grand Slams. Like, that's insane. And I don't know how much, like, it's something that it is something that we have in women's sports that, you know, male athletes don't even have to think about.
Right.
It's a sacrifice that they don't have to think about. Anyways, you know, your career as an athlete is limited only to a certain age, and then you have like almost a year out of that taken out because you have to sacrifice it if you want to have a child. And then especially in women's sports, which is a very like queer community in general, where in a couple, like when it's like two women in a couple, like making that decision of
Which one,
especially if they're both, you know, athletes, which happens a lot, who's gonna, you know, make that sacrifice for the relationship and for their career. And I don't know, I just think it's such a crazy thing that all women have to go through, but again, female athletes have to do it while playing their sport.
Which is also crazy because, like, I feel like sport, or even if you think about any, like, dance, is like such a physical medium, and then obviously giving birth is like the most physical thing. And as you said, there's like a ticking time bomb on both, because you run out of like your athlete years, and you also run out of when you can have a baby. So both are kind of on a ticking bomb, and like in an athletic sense, in an athletic world, you're also competing against other people, so you can't lose ranking, your sponsorships on the line, there's so many, you can't let your team down, there's so many other factors. And I feel like to negotiate both parts, which are such important parts of your life, at the same time must be so difficult. And then not even mentioning that there's a recovery period after pregnancy and things like that.
Bonding with your baby. It's not just about it's not just about the 9 months of pregnancy. It's the breastfeeding after that, bonding with your child, and then raising that child.
The fact that it's on a timeline that is kind of the same timeline is insane.
I mean, does anyone know how much like your body and or hormones like change after pregnancy?
I have no idea.
I know that a lot of women go through like postpartum depression. And I haven't looked into this, but it's something I do wonder about when it comes to female athletes, because going back to, they always have to be like on their mentally like strong game or whatever, and then like having to deal with, now not only am I like I'm a whole other person, I'm a mother now, so like I have to take care of this child, I have to breastfeed, but I also have to get back into the game, and I feel like that would trigger me.
There are so many, and like there was this meme going around when because recently two like very like prominent female footballers like were pregnant, like part of the US women's national team, and someone like tweeted being like, I pray for their next pregnancy that their husband somehow can carry the children, because they're like starting forward, score all the goals, and like of course it's so cool and crazy that, you know, we get to be pregnant and give birth to children, but
it's a like, difficult thing to negotiate.
Something like to give up your career for so long, and maybe something could go wrong and you don't even know, and then you have to give up your career
altogether. Also, there was like some woman, I forgot her name, I'm sorry, we will put that in here, who was running an ultra race, and whilst she was breastfeeding, and she still got like, if I'm not mistaken, a podium finish or a really good finish time, which is insane for like, I can't think of anyone running an ultra and breastfeeding, and the fact that it's and for that to not be a headline, like I feel like in the space of male sports, that would be like in like that would be.
Right, but like no one is covering that for that to not be
I think about that all the time. Even like there's a lot of memes that say like if men had their periods, it would be like this macho thing that everyone knows about. Whereas we're kind of done like shh. Don't say anything.
Exactly. Periods should just not be taboo. Like it's 2025.
Should we go into menopause? The reason why I was really interested in talking about menopause is because I know that, and also as you were saying, that the estrogen level in the body kind of declines, and so what that kind of means for how your body recovers and stuff like that, which you can talk about. But also what that means for both female athletes and just women who are active.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to menopause and staying fit, I think people forget that having muscle is like the foundation for women's health, because as estrogen declines, we naturally lose all of our muscle. So strength training now from a young age will set us up for when we're in our 40s, 50s, whatever it is, when we start menopausing, because that estrogen decline will basically take away our muscle and also bone density. So at that point, if we don't have adequate muscle and bone density, we're going to be more prone to injuries, not just as female athletes, but just as active women in general. So for me, I think if I don't know much about menopause yet, but if I were to like give anyone like advice or a suggestion, it would be start strength training now, lay that foundation for yourself, build that muscle, because one day you're not going to have it. And if you don't want to be injured, if you want to be able to play with your grandkids, whatever it is, you need that muscle, you need that bone density. It's not going to be there one day.
Yeah. But yeah, I think also that's another argument for like just being, as you said, being super active, athletic, and building a community of women that like values that strongly.
Because I mean, women we're not told to build muscle. Like I feel like for men it's just like, once you reach like 18, 19, go hit the gym, like get strong, like go be bulky, whatever it is. But for girls it's like, no, do more cardio, stay small. And no one understands or talks about that. We actually need to be strength training more than men. We need that muscle.
Yeah, I also want to see a fashion brand that's not like athleisure or athlete fashion, but that is built for like strong female body types. And sometimes when I was at my most muscular, but I didn't look like the version of like fit and strong woman that you're supposed to look like. Like I was not lean. I was like, my shoulders were broad, but I didn't have like the definition, but I know I was at my strongest because I was lifting my heaviest, and that's what that looked like for me. And I feel like everyone's image of what strong and muscular looks like is very different. And you should like, I wish there was more ability to like build your sense of style, fashion to that.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think circling back to what you were talking about missing your periods or like losing your periods when you were training really hard. A lot of female athletes like opt to not have their period altogether by taking birth control, right? And like, why do they do that? Is it just because they think it's an inconvenience?
Yeah, I think for the most part it is considered to be inconvenient to have to deal with that experience every month. But I think what people aren't realizing is that having your period, menstruating and ovulating, that's a vital sign for a female body. Like however, whatever your other vital signs are, this should, for females, I think this should be considered one as well. And female athletes that go on birth control, you're basically like masking your body's ability to produce its own hormones, and then when you do that over a large period of time, that function kind of like depletes. It's kind of like a muscle, right? You have to keep training it for it to like stay at a certain strength. If you take away your body's ability to produce its own hormones, it's gonna get fucked up. That's not a good thing. And I'm not like entirely against birth control. Like obviously there are certain women who need it, but if you're just doing it because you don't want to experience a period. I
Yeah.
think that's not the right way to go about things.
Yeah.
And then there are also studies on how birth control affects your muscle building capacity. So it declines that. So not only are you taking away your periods, you're masking your ovulation, you're also just like shooting yourself in.
The foot,
Yeah.
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 And also, like if you're, reducing the production of your hormones by taking birth control, and you said that estrogen is tied to serotonin, like I don't even want to imagine what that feels like
Yeah.
being on birth control.
I mean, you're getting like a steady flow of synthetic hormones. So
Okay.
like not in the moment, but for the short term, you'll feel like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But long term effects
Yeah.
are not good.
Yeah.
And is birth control something that is like prescribed like to help PCOS?
Yes.
But does it, like, do you think it actually helps?
I was on birth control for a couple of years and I didn't like it. Whatever I'm saying about birth control, I could feel that. I could feel that I wasn't truly myself. And there are different types of birth controls where it's like more progesterone or more estrogen or whatever that is. So it depends on the type you take. But also because I started learning more about my hormones and I just knew that there was something synthetic in my body and I wasn't really helping myself improve my symptoms. All I was doing was masking them. That itself was just like, this is not worth it. Like, I am someone who wants to have kids later on, so if I just keep masking my cycle and my symptoms, when it comes time to be off birth control, everything bad is gonna come back. So what's the point of me being on this? I'd rather like get to the root cause, figure things out, even if it takes longer, than be on birth control.
So it's almost just like temporarily blocking it while you're on it, and while you
it shuts off the communication between your brain and your ovaries. Think about that.
No, don't say that. That gave me goosebumps. That's so sad. That's like, it's like cutting off communication with your limb.
Yeah.
Like it's just like wow, not being in tune with your
So
body.
it isn't like a long-term solution or cure. It's just like a short-term, like block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically.
That's crazy.
There's so much like that we don't know about or don't learn. Like no one.
Yeah,
tells
like,
us.
and I've like heard that there are like multiple ways to get birth control, and
It's so easy.
yeah,
Like, you can.
and there's like an injection or like a skin patch. Like they're like
Yeah. There's different.
I can't believe there's so much research behind how to stop my period, and then not so much research behind like other things. My period,
Yeah.
And I guess to just like
On that note, actually, optimization of periods. I'm curious about like if any active person is watching this, or us as active people or athletes, what are your recommendations for optimizing periods in terms of training cycles? And also, what are the symptoms that I can be listening to from my body to better understand what she's going through?
Yeah, I would say first start with tracking your cycle. So note down when you get your period, when it ends. Do that every month and you'll kind of get an idea of how long your cycle is. You could also use like tracking devices, period apps that may give you like predictions and stuff. But if you just want to do the basic way, just start with that. And then I would say track your mood and your symptoms and how you feel, both to do with like after a workout. So for example, today, cycle day 4, my period usually lasts 3 days, and my 3rd or 4th day, I've noticed I feel amazing. So before coming here, I went on like a nice long run, and I know that I'm going to feel good at this time every month. So I'll kind of schedule my like longer runs, or when I'm trying to up the weight that I'm lifting around this time. So that's kind of how I would do it. And then like if you are someone who tracks like your HRV, your RHR, I know you have like, is that a fitness watch?
No, it's a Casio.
I have an Apple Watch.
Also, what are these abbreviations?
So heart rate variability is basically, HRV is the time between each like heartbeat. So there's no like, obviously higher the better, but it depends on each person. And then RHR is your resting heart rate, so lower the better. It just means you're like fitter, calmer person. So those metrics also change throughout your cycle. So if you are someone wanting to get fitter and you're tracking your HRV, you know at certain times of the month it spikes. So you can schedule like tougher sessions at those times so that at that point next month you can push yourself even harder. Also, if you are someone who strength trains, for example, people talk about having deload weeks. So maybe schedule your deload week for a time in your cycle that you know you're not going to be stronger, and then schedule your PRs for a time that you know you'll be stronger.
Yeah.
So on that note, like suppose I'm journaling about my period and I'm tracking my period and I'm seeing like when am I hungrier, when do I need more things to like put into my body, when do I feel like I need more sleep, when and I'm also looking at things like how sore am I feeling the next day on this day of my period. Are there any other things that you would suggest tracking, like specifically?
I think you said the main ones, like appetite, sleep is huge. Cravings, I think like just need for more sugar and energy. How quickly you recover, so if like soreness, then you have like those metrics, HRV, RHR, things like that. And then like I would go into like perceived like exertion, so how much you think you're exerting, like maybe have a scale for yourself, 1 to 10, and then how fatigued you are at the end of a week.
Awesome.
So,
and also I'm guessing like mental, like tracking moods and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Awesome. I feel like I have
How
a toolkit.
motivated you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel so like
And
like,
also how you feel about yourself, which I think makes a huge difference. Cool, I feel like I have a toolkit. Training with my period. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here and teaching us all so much about our periods and our cycles.
Thank you for having me.
Is there anything you wanna like plug, like your Instagram?
Follow my Instagram down below.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next